Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming today. I can see that there's lots more people just entering, so I'm just going to give it just a bit of time so that you can enter and get settled. I'm really looking forward to this session, and we thank you all so much for taking the time out to be here. Yeah, it's great to see so many people. The numbers, I'm just looking at the numbers and they're just going up and up and up. So yeah, it's really great to see all of you here. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, well, I think we should start because we've got a lot to get through. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Johnny, and I am the founder of the charity Beyond. We are a youth mental health charity that was formed 2 years ago, and together with Inside Out Day, we created the Now and Beyond Mental Health Festival, which has been happening all of today, and that's the reason why we've got our clothes inside out. And yeah, we wanted to do the session because we felt it was really important and really needed in the current climate that we're in. And before I actually introduce our amazing speakers, I actually wanted to start with a little poem. I've written a little poem. I always write poems for things. It's a bit sad, but yeah, I've written a little poem. It won't take long, but here we go. So, teachers, thank you for all that you do. You give so much, you work so hard. Now it's time to take care of you. I know the days may feel rough. I know the time we're in is tough. But please know there's support whenever you're overwhelmed with thoughts. You're never alone, even when it may feel that you are. Know that we're with you, know that we're there. And please remember, we really do care. Teachers, we're so grateful and we don't say it enough. So we hope you hear it today and recall it when life's tough. Please take this time to focus solely on you. Put everything else aside. There's nothing that you need to do. But give yourself this hour. We hope you'll feel empowered to take care of your mind, to make sure that you're gentle and kind on you, dear teachers. We're so glad that you're here. Thank you for showing up. We all love you so dear. So yeah, just a little thing that I wrote. I wanted to express my thanks to all of you. But yeah, you're not here to hear from me, so let's get on with the session. Just to say, the session is recorded and it will be sent out to attendees within 24 hours. Please ensure that you don't use anything that identifies you or share any personal information. So I'm really excited to introduce Rena and Manisha, who are from the Anna Freud Center. We're so excited and so grateful that they're here. So everything that the Anna Freud Center does is focused on supporting children, young people and their families. So we have Rena, who's the head of training in mental health and wellbeing in the schools team. She's a counselling psychologist. And we have Manisha, who's the training manager for the mental health and wellbeing in schools team and has vast experience as a senior leader in schools. So please do ask questions. We really want to encourage interaction. We want to hear from you, and everything is anonymous. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to the Anna Freud Center, and thank you so much again for being with us.
Thank you, Johnny. Welcome everybody. My name is Manisha. It's really good to be here today, and thank you so much for inviting us. We really enjoy these opportunities to talk to staff, and certainly I feel with my background, I really do understand the landscape that you are working in currently, and we just really hope that the session today is going to be really helpful and supportive, and this is all about you. So we've got some great practical suggestions that we are going to share with you this afternoon, and Rena has got some excellent mindfulness and relaxation techniques that she's also going to share as a clinician. So I really hope you find it useful. And as Johnny said, just to reiterate that, Rena and I love having interactive sessions, and if we could be in a physical space with you, we would like to be. Sadly, we can't under these circumstances, but what we would like to say is please put any questions that you have that are sort of general questions that you would like to ask into the chat, and one of us will try and pick those up as we go through or feed them into our discussion this afternoon. So welcome, sit back, enjoy and relax, and hopefully you'll find some really interesting, helpful information in our presentation for you today. So thank you. Okay, so I just want to focus first of all on what this session is going to all be about. And basically it's going to give you some practical tools for promoting and supporting staff wellbeing in schools and colleges. And the main thing about the work that we do and all of the different suggestions that we will give you is that it's all founded in evidence, and it's going to be sort of part of a cognitive behavioural model. So we're going to be thinking specifically about understanding what staff wellbeing actually means, and sort of resilience and the importance of promoting these concepts at the moment, now more than ever. Always important, and certainly when I was working in schools it was important, but I think now more than ever this is really vital. We want you to try and start to understand the link between feelings, thoughts and behaviours, and how that can help you support yourself and sort of how you're feeling in the current context. We want to be able to identify and reflect on some practical self-care strategies for you that you can actually use. And at the end of the session, what we're going to be doing is signposting you to some trusted mental health and wellbeing resources and sources of support. So hopefully that will be really helpful. So I'm going to start off by just thinking about sort of a generic term, really. Staff wellbeing is something that I think I hear in the news every single day at the moment. So it really is so important, wellbeing and your mental health. So why is it so important? So I think what we know and what do we mean by staff wellbeing? Sorry, I'm just going to give us a chance to catch up on the slide. So if we could just move to slide 4, please. Sorry. That's fabulous. Thank you so much. So just thinking then about wellbeing and what it actually means. So what is staff wellbeing? So we know that it's about our physical, mental and our emotional health. And I think if we think about it in terms of balance, so we need to be able to think that when we're feeling good and our well-being is good, we've got a really good balance in our life of all the different things that are going on, and we can manage and we can really cope well. Resilience is also about coping well and about feeling motivated and engaged. And when you're feeling resilient, you're able to engage in a variety of different things. And I think what we hear from teachers at the moment, and we have done throughout this last year, is that actually coping is something that people are finding quite a challenge at the moment, and their resilience, although it might have been really high at the beginning, is starting to wane in some circumstances. We also know that there is a direct link between an increase in wellbeing and an increase in performance and being able to support the pupils that you work with. So if your wellbeing is not good and you're not feeling good about yourself, it's really hard to support those around you. And whether that's, you know, the children that you're working with in school, or whether that's your own family, you will see an impact if you're, you know, if you've got a decrease in your own well-being. So it's important to remember that. And I think the key word here, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in a moment when we look at a specific scientific model, is about balance. Because although we all want to feel really happy a lot of the time, well-being is all about being balanced, because it would be exhausting to be either end of a spectrum. Thank you. So a definition of well-being, and there is a lot of research that has gone into this, and there's a reference there if you were interested in looking at it. But I want to focus really on this model, because I think certainly when I was a teacher, this is something that was really important to me. So if you think about the model of well-being in terms of being a seesaw, and you sit, your well-being sits in the middle of that. And at either end of the seesaw, you can see that at one end, you've got challenges. And those challenges could be psychological, they could be social, and they could be physical, all the things that you manage and you face on a day-to-day basis. But when things are going well and your well-being is good and you're feeling able to cope, you have the resources to be able to manage all of those challenges. And it will help a sense of well-being. You will be able to stay in that middle and feel well balanced, because although you might have challenges coming your way, the resources that you have will be able to manage those challenges. So it's about thinking, how can you build up those resources into your sort of container or your toolkit, so that when those challenges come your way, you have got the resources to be able to manage them. So just kind of bear that in mind. You're thinking about your well-being and where it's sitting. And if you think about when those challenges outweigh the resources that you've got to manage, that's when your well-being is going to be off balanced. And it may be that you are experiencing some feelings like that at the moment, which would be completely understandable. So we want to, through this session, give you some suggestions about how you can fill up your toolkit and your resources so that you can manage those challenges as they come.
We've had a couple of questions already in the chat, which is great. So one of the questions was, how do you weave well-being into everyday life in school? And so we're going to be talking about some targeted, universal and services, but also we'll be helping you to think about what you can practically do to take care of your own well-being. And we'll introduce our 5-step frameworks where you can find information around audits as well. So there's lots to come in terms of signposting and some practical tips as well.
That's fabulous. Thank you, Rena. Okay, so just thinking then about a mental health spectrum, and I think if we think of it in terms of having healthy at one end and unwell at the other end, and obviously those would be the extremes, but I think it's really important to remember that we can move up and down this spectrum in any direction at any time. And just like our physical health, our mental health can really vary, and it can vary over the course of a day and different experiences that might come your way. So movement up and down this spectrum can sometimes occur through sort of positive and negative events, or maybe circumstances that happen to you, particularly in the course of a school day. And it could be that unhelpful or helpful actions that people around you within your school community, they can have an impact too. And it might be that they sort of move you up and down this spectrum. So we need to remember that our mental health and our well-being, our sense of well-being, is fluid, and it really does change over time. And it's not a case of saying, oh, you know, I'm really struggling, I'm always going to be struggling. That's not the case at all. The whole point is that this can fluctuate and move up and down on a daily basis. And I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind. Don't feel that just because you're having a day where things are really, you know, causing you to feel like you're struggling, that you're always going to feel like that. So it's important to remember this as a fluid model. Thank you. So I think if we think about teacher resilience specifically, so we understand that resilience really is it kind of overlaps with self-care, and there's lots of evidence out there about, you know, what makes us resilient, and it could be that you kind of think about it in terms of beating the odds, or grit and determination, or bending not breaking and bouncing back. But I think it's really important to remember teachers' beliefs about themselves. And I know when I was teaching, this was really important to me, and about my role and sort of how I was sort of feeling in terms of feeling resilient. And I wanted to be that teacher, you know, that felt I was really capable and that I was good at my job. Some other teachers might think that it's a real calling and that you're making a difference. That's something that I used to hear a lot in school. And I think for new teachers and those that are new to the profession, if there's any of you out there listening, you know, you may be feeling at this moment in time, things can only get better because, you know, a pandemic has never happened before and we're in a really sort of unknown territory here, but all of us are experiencing the same thing at this time. So I think sort of bearing that in mind, so absolute acknowledgement that, you know, teacher resilience is a real challenge, particularly at the moment.
And I suppose that links in with one of the comments that's come in around, I suppose, how teachers might be perceived, so whether they're prioritised right now, perhaps conflict around that, or misassumptions around teachers not working hard enough. And, you know, that's a real challenge in terms of sort of the media and how that might make you feel in terms of a sense of belonging, or, you know, I'm sure lots of us go into this type of role because we care and we want to make a difference. So that's also really challenging when we don't feel like we're supported. So, you know, some of the tools that we'll show you will help you to think about your own personal well-being, particularly during this changing climate.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So I think just, you know, sort of just quickly promoting school staff resilience and sort of developing an evidence base. And I think what we have found out is that the factors in work that really sort of buffer and minimise the impact of any kind of adverse features are those positive interactions with colleagues. And certainly, as I say, you know, doing training right through this lockdown, that's a real challenge. You're operating in bubbles. You might not necessarily have the interaction with your colleagues that you have had in the past. And I think that is in itself causing challenges within schools, where you've had maybe that space within a staff room or a department space where you've been able to share with colleagues and get support from one another. That is lacking at the moment because of the way in which schools are operating. And obviously at the moment, you're in even more isolation if you're not able to actually go into school. So I think it's really important to kind of acknowledge the challenges that are out there at the moment. Thank you. So if we just think then about this as a model of resilience, I think it's really sort of important to think about where you sit within this model. And this is a model that Rena and I, you know, really sort of enjoy sharing, because actually teachers' relationships with key others and the actions they take or act in, often in combination, will act as a buffer, which can kind of protect your belief about yourself and your role and how you can manage those external challenges. So you think, looking at this model, if you think about the context that we're currently finding ourselves in and the challenges that that's bringing, you know, having that sort of buffer sort of part in the middle that protects your beliefs is really important to teachers at the moment. So just thinking about that and how you know, that can kind of really support you, and thinking about the relationships that you have and then some of the actions which are able to be the buffer for those beliefs that you hold. So just kind of sort of remembering that is quite helpful. So just thinking then about some of the importance of staff wellbeing, it's always been widely acknowledged and totally recognised, and I absolutely understand how working in schools is tough at the best of times because you're managing, you know, challenges with some of the behaviour. It could be that you've got deadlines that you have to meet, sort of reaching certain targets, those kind of things all are challenging, and they're challenging for sort of work conditions for you to be operating in. And I think it's really significant to say that every year 10% of teachers decide to leave the profession, and that this percentage rises to 26% for new teachers within the first 3 years. And I'm sure actually if we were to look at that information in a year's time, it could be even higher. I think more so than ever, and this was certainly something that I experienced as a safeguarding lead myself, is that, you know, these issues can often be very intense and complex. And I think the real focus that we're currently seeing on children's mental health in a school setting is a real reminder to staff about how we need to really kind of couple that with supporting staff as well. So it's not just about children's mental health and their wellbeing, that's obviously very important. But remember, as a member of staff, you are not well equipped to support a child or a young person or a family if your own mental health is not good and not feeling balanced at this time. So just thinking then about the importance of staff wellbeing, so there are some real benefits in investing in it. So we know that there's a positive impact on pupils, productivity and attainment can be increased, you are less likely to be absent from school if you're feeling that you're valued and that your staff wellbeing, your wellbeing is being looked after, you're better able to manage stressful situations and help to meet those deadlines. And you're going to feel much more valued. If you've got a team who are really looking out for you and supporting you, you are much more likely to feel valued and invested in. And that's really important. And, you know, we know that when we have a positive well-being, we can really connect well with others. And when we feel that our life is in balance, if you think back to that seesaw model, it means that you can really set an example for the children that you're working with and model really good practice to them. So I think it's really important that, you know, it's recognised how important this is.
Manisha, we had kind of a question which probably links in with what we're going to talk about now, but if there's any tips, so it's hard to cater for the needs of all staff. So I think there will be a limit to sort of what schools can do, but then there's also some sort of individual responsibility because there's only so much that a school can control, but we can encourage people to take care of themselves too. But I don't know if you had any tips around, I suppose, managing the different dynamics within a school and kind of different needs, different opinions on things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, depending on the size of your school, it's really important that you speak to each other about the types of things that you might find to be helpful. You know, I think it's not helpful to say that you're going to do something like yoga on a Wednesday. That's not necessarily going to appeal to everybody. So you need to start by sort of doing a survey of staff and what the kind of things that they would like. But something that is always helpful is just those kind of small acts of kindness can go a really long way. So lots of schools that I've worked in where maybe you've been secretly connected with another member of staff and you can just leave them like just a little post-it note saying, oh, you know, I think you did a really good job today, or something really positive that actually makes a really, really big difference to a member of staff who might be really struggling. And then I think sort of some opportunities to encourage staff to actually think about things themselves that would be helpful for them and their own well-being, and maybe give them some space where they could do those things themselves. So I know some schools might have a Wellbeing Wednesday where they are told to not take any marking home and actually have some space where they could do something for them. I think that's quite a nice suggestion. So again, we will be thinking about maybe some other ideas as well as we go through.
And if you have any ideas of what you're doing in your schools, then do share them and we can kind of circulate that too.
Okay, so there's just some ideas here. So if we think about universal support around staff wellbeing, so these are things that could apply to everybody. There's some suggested ideas there on the universal support one. And you can see there that might, that needs to start really with policy, possibly sort of some drop-in sessions. It could be that there are wellbeing events which are run regularly. So things that all staff could access. And the second thing, as you can see on this slide here, is targeted support around staff wellbeing. So is there an opportunity within your schools to have maybe some reflective space? Is there somebody that teachers or school staff can speak to just so that they feel that they're well supported? Or it might be that you're lucky enough to have a proper supervision opportunity within your setting. So again, it could be that you are able to do this to a really low cost degree just using peer support. So thinking creatively about how you can manage that. It could be that your staff would really benefit from some specialised training around mental health. And certainly we offer some really good training that is really general training that would be really helpful for schools. And also just some sort of mandatory check-in, so some opportunities where you can say to one another, are you okay? Is everything all right? Is there somebody who you can talk to? Is there someone within school who, you're happy to share how you're feeling? So those kind of things. And then we'll move on to
kind of tips coming through. Sorry, Manisha.
Yeah, no, carry on.
We've just got some coming through from some of the audience. So really the key thing is about the environment, the culture and communication. So we know that, as we sort of mentioned, relationships are at the heart of what's going on and how people engage. And if you think about this time of uncertainty, what that does is it puts us into an emotionally unsafe position because we might not feel as contained. So any opportunities to think about staff containment, mapping out what's available, how people can access this, helpline numbers, other services that staff can access is really important. Opportunities to just connect and talk and debrief could be really important as well. And a couple of other points that people have mentioned. So the SLT or the head is really vital in terms of creating that culture of well-being. How do you end up investing in your staff? One school is doing a wellbeing day on a Friday. Other schools are doing like randomized coffee trials to get people connected, trauma-informed practice, and lots of great ideas sort of coming through. So general themes like offering hot cocoa, birthdays, so acknowledgement, teacher appreciation week, a staff quiet room as well if staff are in school, or perhaps just quiet times if they're doing things virtually. In terms of good staff wellbeing policy, we're going to share lots of resources at the end, and we'll kind of show you where you can find that information. So just bear with us, and towards the end we'll go through some resources with you.
That's great, thank you. So just thinking then a bit more about sort of some specialist provision around staff wellbeing. So I don't know whether you're familiar with the whether you're familiar with the Employee Assistance Programme. So the Education Support Partnership is a really, really good website. It's a free website. It's got a 24-hour helpline on there. You can talk to them about a number of different things. They do some really great posters that you can put around your school so that staff can access the support that is available, and it's completely confidential. And also it covers a wide range of different issues that staff might be struggling with, not just mental health issues. So lots and lots of different things. So we would really encourage you, as it's completely free, to get involved and have a look at that. I think you would find it a really helpful website if you're not already involved. And as I said, there's posters that you can put up around your school to share with other members of staff. So yeah, just moving on then, just thinking about some of the support that we're offering at Anna Freud. So we've collated lots of coronavirus resources together under 6 different headings that are specifically for young people, parents and carers, schools and colleges, early years, and mental health professionals and research. So please do have a look at that website. There's lots and lots of different ideas on there of how you can support one another, but also how you can support the young people that you're working with, as well as families, parents and carers. The Mentally Healthy Schools website is a website which features lots of quality assured mental health and wellbeing resources, specifically at the moment for primary schools, but very, very soon we are also introducing a secondary school element to this website. So look out for that. It's coming very soon, and there will be equivalent resources for secondary schools as well. And the idea of the Mentally Health Schools Coronavirus Toolkit specifically is to support school staff, parents and carers during these uncertain times. And there is lots and lots of really good toolkits and practical resources that you can access. The good thing about this is if you go into this website, you will see that all of the things there have been quality assured by clinicians at our centre, so you know that all of the resources here are really, really good. So please do have a look at that as well if you're interested in some specific resources. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Over to Rena.
Yeah, I think as we can see, there is a lot of pressure at this point in time. Many of us are juggling many different roles. So, we are human as well. We are experiencing the impact of the pandemic, which will impact all of us very differently. And I think we will share our 5 steps framework, which gives you a whole school approach to thinking about mental health and well-being, and staff well-being is very much a part of that. I think one of the challenges is it does take some time to elicit longer term change in terms of cultural change within a school, but there are things that you can do at a universal, specialised and targeted level, and we'll kind of show you some resources around that. But there's something really important here about thinking about how we take care of ourselves. So one of the things that we can do is encourage people to reflect on how they're feeling, think about how we open up discussions around our well-being, how safe that feels, and also thinking about strategies that we can utilise to take care of ourselves, because that's also really great when we're modelling some behaviour around that. So we're going to focus on sort of stress and how you might manage that individually a bit more now, but we will share some sort of more holistic whole school approaches later on in terms of what we signpost you to. But we want you to actually have some time for yourselves and a time to sort of stop. So we'll be going through some practical activities, some practical tips, which you can share with staff, because that's a good way to start to open up the discussion around mental health, stress, anxiety, and a whole range of emotions. So a fluctuation in emotions is really normal right now. And going back to the spectrum, you might fluctuate up and down on a daily or hourly basis sometimes. So just useful to acknowledge that. Thank you. So we often think of stress as a really bad thing. And although stress isn't something that we constantly want to be living with, I think it's also really useful to sort of be aware that not all stress is bad. So stress is a normal part of life, and it allows us to help us to develop more positive coping strategies. So when we're in sort of the good stress zone, that can increase our adrenaline. It can actually help us to focus and rise to the challenge, and we can learn from those experiences. So there's lots around how we perceive stress, but also different types of stress and how that impacts us. So we can use stress as an opportunity to sort of learn and develop healthier coping strategies. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as you can see, one of the things that we're thinking about is the intensity of the stress that we're experiencing. So when we think about mental health, we really want to be aware of stress or anxiety or another feeling which kind of is too intense for too long, that impacts too many things around us. So whether it's our relationships or our ability to function or cope or to engage with life. So it's not the emotion itself, it's the intensity, the duration and the impact of that emotion on our day-to-day functioning. So if you can think about stress, often we tend to think about toxic stress as being sort of the bad stress, and that's the stress that we need to kind of look out for and be aware of. But there are different levels. So we can experience sort of daily stress, and that can be when things just don't go to plan. So, you've got another deadline that comes in, or you've got emails that come in that you need to respond to, or perhaps there's been a safeguarding concern that's come up and you need to formulate your day, so you've got some time to deal with that. So usually the trigger is mild, there's a short duration to it. The stress response is temporarily activated, performance is enhanced, and you deal with the challenge. So you overcome the challenge. And then we might go into more tolerable stress, and a lot of us might be in that zone now because of the pandemic and sort of a loss of containment as well, or predictability. Usually when we experience tolerable stress, it can be moderate in terms of the trigger. So we could think of this as an example might be a parent who's been ill for a long period of time. So you might be a carer for that person. So you might still be experiencing stress and worry, but usually you have some support and some way of coping, and that is a buffer. So even when we experience tolerable or toxic stress, we can create support networks and we can create healthier coping strategies. So it doesn't mean that we have to be in the survival mode, which is the toxic part of the stress response. Usually when we're experiencing toxic stress, it takes over our whole life. It's very intense. It impacts our functioning on a day-to-day basis, and we don't have the right support or coping mechanisms in place. So if we go back to the spectrum, you can still be technically have a diagnosis and be in sort of the suffering end of the spectrum, but with the right support, you can cope relatively well with day-to-day life. So we need to help people to think about their protective factors or the positive things in their life that buffer the stress for them. And I'd encourage you to think about your protective factors. And if you can't name any, then that might be a really good place to start. So as we go through the remaining parts of today's session, just think about what you can take away with you, which can almost become either a better coping mechanism or a protective factor for yourself. So now we're going to talk about feelings. So I don't personally like the term kind of good feelings or bad feelings. I think feelings are feelings and they're telling us something about what we're experiencing. So they're a really powerful response to our environment. Now, feelings can be our emotions, but they can also be physiological responses, so the way that our body reacts. And sometimes we feel the physical before our mind catches up to what's happening. But there is a link between our feelings, our thoughts, and our behaviours. And we get into patterns in terms of how we deal with feelings or process our thoughts. And usually when we experience anxiety or we experience stress, on some level, there's an indication that we're not feeling safe in our environment. So that is emotional safety, not necessarily physical safety, because you might be in a safe enough environment physically, but you still might feel anxious or stressed because you feel emotionally unsafe. So your body in that instance can't tell the difference between a lion walking into the room or an email that's just come in, which has upped your stress levels. It can trigger the same response. But usually we do develop patterns for dealing with our feelings. So there is a connection then between our feelings, our thoughts, and our behaviours. So as we go through this time of uncertainty and time of change, you know, that might put us on hyper alert. So we might be more sensitive to anxiety and more sensitive to our feelings. So what we can do is develop more positive coping mechanisms. So we can develop more positive behaviours in terms of how we respond to our environment. So we can use new strategies, but we can also find ways to manage and regulate our feelings, particularly when we feel overwhelmed. And that's what we're going to look at now. So the first step is around thinking about your feelings. And a lot of you may have sort of done this with some of the students or young people that you work with, but it's really important to have some tools in your toolkit and to think about what's in your wellbeing toolkit. So I just thought it'd be useful to go through some really quick techniques that you could use on a day-to-day basis if you're starting to feel either anxious or stressed, or if you just want to feel calmer and more relaxed, because our bodies are really powerful. They can't be relaxed and stressed at the same time. It's usually one or the other. So techniques like these can help you to regulate your emotions. When you regulate your emotions, you feel calmer. When you feel calmer, you can engage more logically in what you're doing and think of solutions. So it's a healthy way to manage stress or anxiety. And I want to show you techniques that you can do on the go. I think sometimes the misconception is you need lots of time to be able to engage in these techniques, but sometimes even 30 seconds or a minute can make all of the difference. So I'm going to just go through this, and if you'd like to try them with us, then please do. But I'll talk you through them and just think about whether you could use any of these, but also reflect on what happens to your body when you feel stressed. Because it's great to have techniques, but you also need to know when to use it. So when do you kind of notice a rise in your stress levels? What happens? Because that's when you could use a technique like something we're going to go through now. So we'll start with breathing, and breathing really is the basis of most mindfulness and relaxation techniques. So usually when we get anxious or stressed, the first thing to go is our breathing, but it's something that we can concentrate on to help bring us back to this moment. So a really quick and simple technique is to just sit wherever you are or stand wherever you are. I always encourage people to feel their feet on the floor, just because that grounds you to where you are in that present moment, and it's got a grounding effect. So in terms of counting breath, all you'd simply do is breathe in, and you might count for 2. There we go, and breathe out, count for 2. So breathe in, and 2, and out, and 2. Simple. But now I'm going to show you something which just helps you to focus on how you're breathing. Now, this is called square breathing. And the great thing about square breathing is it's not obvious, and you can use anything that you see in front of you. So I could use my laptop screen, I could use my phone. If you're tactile, you could use your hand, you could trace a square. If you're a doodler like me, you might kind of doodle a square, or just imagine a square. But essentially, you want something with 4 sides, or an image of something with 4 sides, to help you to really think about how you're breathing, because you're engaging your logical brain here. And if you engage your logical brain, you're coming out of fight or flight or survival mode, which is the anxiety bit, and you're coming into a more grounded, relaxed you. So I've got something here which just has 4 sides, just so I can show you. And so what you would do is you would use the sides to help you breathe. So you would breathe in and hold, breathe out, and your belly will be empty and you'll just hold that. So you'll breathe in and hold, breathe out and hold. One more time, in and hold, breathe out and hold. And you can just repeat that as many times as you like. As you can see, we probably did that in 30 seconds. But what you'll start to notice is your body sort of calming and relaxing. But that's a really good thing to also use with children if you're thinking about techniques that you can use with children, because it gets them to focus. I know lots of people are also juggling things like homeschooling or trying to ground children virtually. So these are all techniques that you can use to encourage that. Progressive muscle relaxation is basically the tensing and relaxing of certain muscle groups. So when you breathe in, you'll tense a muscle group, and when you breathe out, you'll relax a muscle group. So I'm just going to show you 2 muscle groups that you might want to use. So the first one is your hands. So I'll keep my hands here. You can keep them on your lap, but just so you can see my hands. And what you will do is breathe in and squeeze, and breathe out and relax. So breathe in and squeeze, breathe out and relax. This is also quite a good one for anger and frustration, because sometimes people feel that in their hands or their shoulders get tense. So if you get tension in your shoulders, you can do the same thing. You'd breathe in and raise, and breathe out and relax. And do that again, breathe in and relax. Once again, it probably took us less than 30 seconds to just go through that. So these are things you can sort of build into your day. If you wanted a less obvious way to do muscle relaxation, what you do is feel your feet on the floor, and you'd breathe in and tense your calf muscles, which will tense up your whole leg, and then breathe out and relax your calf muscles. So if you're sitting on a laptop or sitting under a desk, no one's going to know that you're doing that. I could do that now and you wouldn't even know. So I think it's also good to have things in your toolkit that you can do less obviously, but you can use in things like a meeting, or if you just need to ground yourself, because, you know, people won't know what you're doing, but it's still a technique that will help your body. Talking of mindfulness techniques, there's plenty of mindfulness techniques out there, but a couple of really quick ones which you can do on the go is either color spotting or object spotting. With color spotting, what you would do is pick any color, you'd look around your surroundings. You could do that more obviously or less obviously. Like I could look around my surroundings now, and you would just notice everything that's made up of that color or has that color in it. And in that way, you focus on the present, on the here and now, and you become more attuned to your environment. And if you're in the here and now and you're more present, once again, you're less likely to be in that survival mode or fight or flight. So you could do that with colors, or you could also do that with objects. So object spotting is where you simply look around the space that you're in and really notice the objects that you can see. So if I'm looking at Manisha, I might notice the door behind her and the door is brown. And then there's sort of a white cupboard behind her. I might notice that her top is sort of bluey grey. She's got red lipstick on. So you sort of attune yourself to whatever you can see. And I'll start to hone in on sort of the smaller details. So it could be something that you do on a Zoom call like this as well. So it's really up to you how you use these techniques. But once again, with children, that could be quite a fun thing to ground them in the moment. You could make that into a game and ask them to see whatever they can notice, whatever they can see color-wise. So they're really, really quick techniques, but they do help to bring you to this moment. And last but not least, there's butterfly tapping. This is a really good technique if you are feeling emotionally overwhelmed. It's really good if you sometimes can't concentrate, or you feel like you're kind of escalated to a point where it's hard to switch on your logical brain. What this does is it works with the biology of your body and your immune system to calm that down. So it really works with the physiology of your body. So I don't know if anyone runs here or walks, but essentially what you're doing is this with your feet, and that is the process called bilateral stimulation. So you're getting both parts of your brain to talk to each other, which takes you out of fight or flight again, or that anxious state or hypervigilant state, and brings you back to this moment. Not everyone can go for a walk or a run during the day. So this is, or you might not want to. So this is another way that you can kind of get the same effect, but in your own space. So if you wanted to try this, what you would do is cross your arms, and you would just find a place on your arms, it could be higher or lower, that feels comfortable for you. And what you would do is start tapping one side and then the other. So you can go as fast or as slow as you like. And once again, there's no set time. You just pay attention to your body and see how that feels. And what you'll notice if you keep doing that is your body will just start to relax. You'll feel that. So that's another technique that you can use if useful, but you might have your own tools in your toolkit. So if you have any other techniques that you've used, please do share them in the chat. I think it'd be great for other people to get an idea of what you practically do. But yeah, just what I would suggest is seeing these as skills. The more you practice, the easier they become. So I'd suggest practicing one or two of these techniques at a time where you're not feeling stressed, and sort of doing it more regularly. So if you are in a situation where there's something unexpected that's made you feel stressed or anxious, you can then use this technique because it feels more familiar to you. If you start trying to use new techniques when you're already anxious, it's going to be harder to do that. So just make this a regular part of your day. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, and also the next part, so remember, you've got feelings, you've got thoughts, and you've got behaviors. So what we've just spoken about there is how we use a behavior or a new technique to manage our feelings, but we can also think about our thoughts, because they are extremely powerful and they can change the way that we feel, and they can also change what we do. We don't pay attention to all of our thoughts every day, otherwise we wouldn't do anything else, because we have up to 100,000 thoughts a day. So, you know, naturally some of them become automatic, but what can happen is, if you think about the old CDs, our thoughts can become automatic and they can kind of be on loop in the background, and sometimes they can get skewed more towards the negative. So we can proactively challenge our thoughts, because a thought is just a thought. So we can start to proactively change them if they are getting skewed. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the key thing about thoughts is it's really about the meaning that we give to the event. So that can be based on our previous experiences or how emotionally overwhelmed we're feeling right now. So it's the meaning of the event, and we can change that meaning. So rather than seeing it more negatively, we can look at it in a more balanced way. So there are lots of common thinking errors that we can experience, which is just on the next slide. And we all do some of these. So this isn't a critical thing to say, oh, you've got a thinking error, but really why this slide is here is just to sort of highlight that we all have a tendency to do at least one of these, but we might not notice it. So the first thing is about kind of noticing a negative thought or noticing a thinking error, because that then gives you a chance to shift it and change it over time. Once again, the more you challenge and the more often you challenge, the more you can kind of skew your thoughts more towards being balanced or more positive. So for example, if we think about COVID and the pandemic, I don't think any of us thought about kind of going to the shops as something that might be dangerous. But actually our whole world view has been skewed by this experience. So once again, it's the meaning that we give to the event. So I'd encourage you, and we can share these slides afterwards, just to think about whether there are any thinking errors that you might engage with. And the type doesn't really matter. It's more just about recognizing that you've had perhaps more of a negative thought, and then thinking about how you can challenge that. So on the next slide, there's almost like a little template here for you to think about in terms of how you might start to challenge some of your negative thoughts. So when you have an unhelpful thought, I think sometimes thought challenging doesn't work for people because they try and go completely to the opposite and find a really positive interpretation of that thought. So it's about finding a more balanced thought that feels real for you. So, when you're weighing up a thought, that's essentially what you're doing with thought challenging. So when you notice a negative thought, just think about these questions. What's the evidence for the thought? So if you had to present this thought in court, how would that stand up? So not your felt sense, not your feelings around it, but the real evidence that this thought is 100% factual. And then what's the evidence against that this thought is not 100% factual? What would you say to a friend who was having this unhelpful thought? And Johnny sort of mentioned at the beginning kindness and compassion. And how do we extend that kindness and compassion towards ourselves as well? Are you being overly critical of yourself? And is that helpful? Does it actually make you feel good? Does it make you choose good behaviors? Probably not. So if we want to kind of feel better and change our behaviors, thinking about kindness and compassion towards ourselves is really important. And is there a more balanced way to look at this?
That's really interesting, really, because that links to something someone's put in the chat about your internal sort of narrative and self-talk can become negative, and we don't often realize. So noticing and stopping ourselves is difficult, but so helpful. So positive affirmations do work. So I think that links really well. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I suppose even like an example of a balanced thought might be, I'm really struggling today, but I'm doing the best that I can. So rather than I'm really struggling today and I'm really rubbish at everything and I'm no good at anything and, tapping into like I'm a failure, you're kind of saying, right, this feels really hard, but I am trying. So that's, you are being more compassionate towards yourself, and that's going to impact on how you then engage with things. So it's going to have some good knock-on effects. Once again, keep practicing, keep trying. So they're there as little tools for you to think about. Okay, next slide. So, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we do know that from research that there are certain behaviours which are really positive in terms of enhancing well-being. So things like exercise, sleep, good nutrition, self-acceptance, connection, coping mechanisms, talking about feelings or asking for help. So really think about how you are prioritising your well-being. Is there one or two things that you can almost diarise and put into your weekly routine that might help you and make a difference? Next slide, please. And this leads on to sort of these two questions. And I'd really encourage you to reflect on these two questions, because it's one thing to reflect and then it's another thing to reflect and take action. So, you know, often we do know what would be good for us to engage with, but taking action can feel like the difficult part. But, you know, I think, what does self-care look like for you both inside of school? So is it a quick breathing technique, or talking to a colleague about how you're feeling? And what can you do outside of school? So, you know, how do you then separate your work life from your home life? And, you know, can you prioritize at least one action from each of those parts of your life? And then there's just some tips here around self-care. So, you know, you might take a mindful minute. So some of the breathing techniques that we've just done, or the tapping, or the muscle relaxation, or another technique that grounds you, just to stop for a minute, and just feel your feet on the floor, or you just might notice what you can see around you, and that will be enough. Thinking about your own support network. So you might create a buddy system sort of within school. Who can you talk to within your team? Can you engage in things like random acts of kindness? And Manisha also sort of mentioned things like compliments and praise, because even as adults, we like to sort of be praised and valued and validated. Like, it's really important in terms of how we perceive ourselves, and that can also help with challenging some of the negative thoughts. Thinking about how you debrief and detach. You know, it's no surprise that you're holding so much right now within school. So what support systems do you have in place to sort of try and separate work from home a little bit more, particularly as a lot of us might be juggling lots of different responsibilities now? What structure and routine do you have? Even if it's sort of regular 5-minute breaks, having a chance to have a cup of tea or coffee or something else. So, you know, are you diarising and prioritising that? And also thinking about those two questions. So what does self-care look like for you? And what has a positive impact on your own well-being? So I suppose going back to one of the earlier questions around, you know, different people are going to enjoy different things. So even, you know, making the opportunities for yourself to engage in something that feels good for you is going to be really beneficial and links in with your own personal goals. And then taking action. The last point, I mean, I still have a physical diary, even though I've got like online diaries, but I would even suggest actually booking out time with yourself, and actually see it as a non-negotiable item, just like you would any other meeting. Because often the conflict is that the more we need self-care, sometimes the more it goes on the back burner. So making some time to actually put it in your diary and say that's a non-negotiable can be helpful as you kind of get used to prioritizing that.
So somebody's put in
boundaries.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Rika, that linking to that, somebody said about debriefing and detaching being so important, but really challenging while you're working at home. And I think we would absolutely understand that. But as you say, it links really well to your point about giving yourself some time in your diary when you're able to step away, move away from your screen, even if it's for a few minutes, just to feel that you are in that space.
Definitely. I think I'm just thinking about senior leads as well. I mean, even if you do have a great culture and lots of things in place for people, some individuals will still not want to engage with kind of school-related well-being initiatives. So that's okay. I think you could still encourage people to think about their own self-care, you know, how they say no. Let them know what services are available, like the EAP service or education support, because it's also important for people to feel like they have a choice in terms of how they take care of their own well-being. So we always want to come from an empowered position. We're never enforcing well-being, but we're just kind of making suggestions and encouraging those reflective spaces for people to think about what might work for them. And I think the last thing really is that it's important to just be patient with yourself. So, you know, making changes takes time. So even if it's 5 minutes in the week, it's a really good start. And some self-care is better than none. So even if you take one thing away, just think about what you might do for yourself this week.
Okay, so we're just going to share with you in the last few minutes some resources that we would really recommend. So all of these resources have been quality assured by clinicians at the centre, and we would really recommend these highly. So please do have a look at them if you can. So the first one is staff wellbeing is more important than ever at this time. We absolutely recognise that. And as a centre, we have produced a number of resources, including the booklet that is shown on the slide. And there are many useful websites, services and resources included in that. So you can download that directly. So that's one of the first resources. Next slide, please. We'd also really encourage you to sign up to our free Schools in My network. So this is a network that's been developed by the Centre for Children and Families, and it's aimed at anyone who works within education. It's a free network, and we currently have more than 20,000 members nationally. And through joining this network, you'll be able to download and use our free resources and be kept up to date with research opportunities and have an opportunity to attend our free national networking events, which obviously at the moment are all online. These are some supporting mental health and wellbeing booklets. So we've developed a range of booklets for a range of audiences, and you will see there that we have something for primary school, secondary school, parents and teachers, and there's also one there for supporting staff wellbeing in school. And they are available as well through the Schools in My network, and they're free to download, utilise and disseminate with other members of staff or parents as needed. So please do have a look at those too. Next slide, please. Thank you. And I mentioned the Education Support Partnership. So this is a UK charity which is dedicated to improving the health and wellbeing of teachers, teaching assistants, head teachers, lecturers and support staff in school. So basically everybody who works within a school. It's a free website, and there's lots and lots of 24-hour support that is available. And as I said, it's not just about mental health. They offer lots of practical suggestions and support for things like managing finance and other sort of issues that may be arising at the moment. So we would really encourage you to get involved. We have really, really positive feedback about the Education Support Partnership. So please do have a look at that too. And the mentally healthy schools, so I touched on this. So this features a range of quality assured mental health and wellbeing resources for primary schools currently. So very, very soon we are launching our secondary school part of this website as well. So you will also be able to access resources on there for secondary schools. And the idea is that these resources can support school staff, parents and carers during these uncertain times. And the Mentally Healthy Schools team have been producing fortnightly curated toolkits for useful practical resources. So please do have a look at that. The toolkits have covered many different topics and are still available on how to talk to children about a range of different things, including managing anxiety and improving wellbeing. So we're really proud of our next slide, which is our 5 steps to mental health and wellbeing. So this is a new resource. If you're interested in developing a whole school approach to mental health and wellbeing in your school, everything you need would be available on this framework. So as I say, it's a new resource, and on here you will find lots of practical actions which prioritise mental health and wellbeing alongside teaching in a school or college. And the idea is that by developing some of these different suggestions, you're able to reduce the potential stigma associated with mental health issues and eventually build our mentally healthy education community, which would include all stakeholders. And when you go into the website, this is what you will see on the screen. So you can see there are 5 different steps, and if you click into each one of those, then it will give you suggested ideas and sample policies, case studies, resources, lots of different suggestions of things that you can access and use in order towards developing a whole school approach to mental health and wellbeing. And once you've registered, which is completely free of charge, you then will have access to a tool which is like an action plan tool, where you can identify how far you are in moving along achieving each of those different steps. And this could feed directly into a school improvement plan, which I know senior leaders love. So it's something that we would massively recommend for you to have a look at and to give you lots and lots of different suggestions and ideas. But basically everything that you could possibly need to develop a whole school approach is on that website. So please do have a look. And I think that brings us to our final slide.
Yeah, just to sort of say, because I know lots of people have sort of asked about audits, so the 5 steps would be a great place to start. So that has kind of sample policies and links to audits that you might be able to utilize or feed into your own audit that you create.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. I think we'll hand back to Johnny now with 1 minute to go.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. I mean, I got so much from that. You know, some of the different. I love the what's it called?
Muscle relaxation.
Yes, that one.
Yes.
I mean, so much tension today organising this festival, so I'm going to do that as soon as this finishes. No, seriously, all the tips, everything you said was amazing, and it was great to see all the questions, all the chat that was going on. Thank you so much. We're so grateful to have you. Really, really are. And just to say, actually, to everyone out there, that on our website we've got a special section, we've literally just put it up, which is all about support for teachers, and that's support for you, not you supporting young people. It's actually support for you, including things like education support. So it's all there on our website. We also actually have got one thing. We've got with Place to Be, I'm sure many of you know Place to Be, we are doing a special cohort of teacher trainers. That's starting in a month's time on the 3rd of March. So basically it's a big cohort, and you go through their foundation program to become a champion. So we'd love you to sign up and do that with us. All the information's there on our website under teacher support. But once again, thank you so much. We really are so lucky to have you. Thank you. And thank you to you all for tuning in. We hope that you enjoyed it. We hope you got a lot out of it. And this recording will be available tomorrow, so you can watch again and share with other people. So thank you very much, and take care and have a good evening.
Good luck, everybody. Thank you.